Hey everybody, welcome back to the shop. I'm Izzy, and today we're taking another epic journey on our table saw. This is a jig I built, I don't know, a year or two ago. This jig does some really interesting things with your table saw. It helps for making things like coves, so you can do coved molding, decorative elements. You can use it for doing the raised panel doors, the centers of raised panel door. Talk much? Raised panel doors on their table saw. So I was sitting at my table saw the other day, kind of being thoughtful like I do. And I was thinking if we added a little something to this, we might be able to make aprons, door fronts, all kinds of fun, really interesting elements with just a very simple add-on to this. You're not going to want to miss this. Stick around. So when we're talking about table saws, when we're thinking about them, most people think flat. In other words, you put something flat on the table saw, you run it through the blade, whether it's straight through the blade or, fancy, coving it at an angle to the blade. The piece is still flat on the blade. Well, what if we step out of that mind frame for a minute and start thinking about dimensions? So we're not just on this one plane. We add a second plane to that by lifting the material up or pushing it back down during the process of cutting the cove or whatever. Now that's pretty simple to do. It doesn't sound like it, but it is. So you can take this jig and attach something basic like this to it. So this has just a long bed on it and a cutout in the center here. Now I cut this out pretty large because it needs to be able to move across the blade at different angles. Now, cut this out was really simple. I simply just laid it out with some lines, used an awl to mark 4 corners, and then drilled each one of those corners with a 1-inch drill bit. Then connecting the lines, I used a sharp knife to kind of edge it before cutting it out with a jigsaw. Now edging it means I'm not going to get a lot of tear out on the side of the knife cut. So that's how that was made, and then simply just screwed this fence here to this bottom piece. Now at this point, it's probably not making a lot of sense, but what this does is it offers me the opportunity to add elements to it, like shapes. What I mean by dimensional or raising and lowering is by taking some guides like this and just adding it, say, on each side of a piece. So if I wanted to run this piece through, I would have these guides to follow. Now I need to have something that's going to follow those guides. So to do that, I need to create another, let's call it a guide or fence that's going to go on top of the material, and it's going to follow these elements here. Something simple like this. This is just a piece of plywood that I've cut out that fits my material with some followers. So I can put this right onto my material, and then when I push this through, it follows it. Now you notice obviously that this is just going to pass right over the top of that. But because I don't know what thickness of material I'm going to be cutting, maybe sometimes it's 7/8, maybe sometimes it's 3/4, what I would do is just cut my pattern that I'm following, and then take a piece of scrap that's the same thickness, put it on the material, put that on top, and now all of a sudden I have this second axis or second dimension that we're following when we're running the material through. This creates some really interesting things that we can do. So not only now are we on this one flat plane, but we have a second plane, we're adding dimension. So just like a cove, we can cut a cove in the material, but now we have a cove with an entry point and an exit point that's fairly clean and can be sanded out really quickly instead of just one long cove all the way through the piece. That might not sound super exciting, but let's take a look at what we can actually do with this. One more point to mention before we get into cutting all the fun stuff is that this fixture needs to be movable. I need to be able to move it. Depending on the angle of the auxiliary fence, I'll need to move this back and forth to meet center of my blade. And that can change whenever I change the angle a little bit. Now this gives me a lot of freedom, so I can create all kinds of different shapes and size coves with entry points and exit points. Now at this point, we're simply talking about 2 axes. This is the flat axis and the vertical axis. But imagine if we added a third axis to it, maybe a circular or an A-axis. So as we're turning a piece through, we can also do some elements. In today's video, we're just going to explore our second axis, but I do think it's worth, once you see the results, and I think you'll agree with me, I do think it's worth exploring a third axis as well, being able to create some really, really cool effects. So with this setup, we're set up to do very repeatable results. The last thing we want to think about is the depth of the blade. Now there's no real significant way of being able to, see the depth of the blade from your hand control, other than maybe guessing the number of turns and getting that accurate. We're not going to go that route. So what I want to do is raise the blade up to the height that I want. So let's say I wanted to go 3/8 of an inch above the surface here. I would just raise that blade up to that line. To do that, I could measure on a piece of material like this, and I'm just going to guess here. I'm going to say that's about 3/8 of an inch. Now 3/8 of an inch is a significant cove, but to show you guys the results, so I want you guys to see it really well, I'm going to make a big cove. So this would be much larger than I would normally use in a decorative element. So to do that, I can just put this material in now, and then I'll incrementally raise the blade up. I'm not going to do it all in one pass until I get to the 3/8 mark on my piece of material. So before we cut, I want you guys to think in your heads what this might look like, what you think the end result will be from using this follower with this setup in the material. And so it's going to be this convex shape. Is it going to be an elliptical convex shape? Is it going to be some weird shape? What do you think it's going to look like after we make this cut? So check it out. So it isn't creating like an elliptical cove. It's just got this long element. Now, because the blade is angled, you can see that angled blade comes in, then creates the cove, and then it comes out. Now, this, I know, looks fairly simple, but there's a lot of things that you could do with this. And the really cool thing about this whole system is we can create different followers, and different followers are going to create different patterns. And each pattern can be accentuated as one just interesting element in a piece. Like if this was a drawer front, you could put a door handle in here. That would look really cool. Or you can do a bunch of small movements to create patterns throughout a piece, which would look really interesting, especially this right here. If you think about this reversed or smaller and much more going on, this could be a very interesting element in a piece of furniture. So I think the first thing we need to do, or rather second thing we need to do, is try some different followers and see what happens. So what I've done is I've switched my template from these little fellas to a double. So this will now kind of slide in this. So it's going to approach the blade differently, and it's going to come out of the blade differently. So it will change the geometry of the shape that we cut, which is kind of cool. At least I think it is, but I'm a big dork. So this is the one we just did, and it had an interesting geometry. So the blade entered in, and then it went for a distance, and then it came out. So this one is going to be more like it's going to kind of be constantly moving up and down as it's going through the blade. So it's going to have a smoother kind of feel to it when it's finished out. So instead of doing a bunch more talking, let's just go ahead and cut this thing and see what it looks like. Everybody, thank you so much for watching today's video. I hope that you see the potential in this, the fact that this is infinitely variable with the size flutes we can make, the followers we can use, the different angles, the patterns. There's just so much there, and it's pretty exciting, if I don't say so myself. I mean, we're only touching the tip of the iceberg here, just a little bit. So my channel is always a little bit crazy, and it's meant to be that way. It's meant to try and get people and folks and inspire them to think outside of that single plane of woodworking, or most of the tools that we have can be used for lots of different things. And I hope to show you more of that in the future. In fact, if you're not subscribed, you should do that right now and hit that bell notification so you get notified when our videos come up. If you enjoyed today's video, thumbs it up, share it. It helps a lot. We really appreciate you guys, and we will see you in the next video.